We are back at PJ's Coffee on Airline Drive. I'm Brooke Kirchhoff alongside Nick Underhill and Mike Triplett. The Saints just wrapped up practice in the Superdome as they get ready for their final preseason game. We're going to be previewing the Saints-Texans preseason game on this show today, as well as some position battles that are heating up, which after today's practice, we can say that position battle at kicker is really one that we are going to be watching. And we're talking about so much more on today's show.
Huge battle there, and really kind of a great practice to wrap up training camp for the preseason. We're going to break all of that down, and also great, this PJ's location at 2600 Airline Drive. Come check it out. Freshly built, fresh coffee, great way to start every single day. If you have any medical needs, we always recommend to go check out the Toro Network. They can take care of anything you need done. And if you need a car, go check out my guy, Matt Bowers. Locations all over the Gulf Coast region. Best car dealer you can get hooked up with. He takes care of us. He'll take care of you, so go check them out. The NewOrleans.Football show is proudly presented by PJ's Coffee. PJ's Coffee has some of the best drinks that you can find. They have locations all over the city. They have pastries and everything else you need to get your day started. So go check them out.
For fast relief coffee.
Mike Hoss here. When the AC goes out and it's hot outside, every second counts. For over 40 years, Keefe's AC Heating and Electrical has helped thousands of families stay cool in the sizzling hot months. Keefe's Get You Cool in 3 hours or less guarantee is what our customers love the most. On the North or South Shore, call Keefe's. We'll get you cool in 3 hours or less guaranteed.
Keefe's Air Conditioning and Heating.
And now electrical.
For fast relief, call Keefe.
Moe's Barbecue is located in Metairie. They have your game day needs taken care of. Whether you're tailgating or watching the Black and Gold or LSU at home with friends, Moe's has you covered. Order pulled pork, wings, ribs, sides, and more. Come in with the family for lunch and dinner, as our kids' meals will please even the pickiest of eaters. Tailgating, parties at home, lunch and dinner, Moe's Barbecue will handle it all. Moe's Original Barbecue, 1101 North Causeway Boulevard between 48th and 49th Street in Metairie. Call 504-407-5333 for your catering order today. 504-407-5333. Moe's Original Barbecue in Metairie. Hardhide Ponchatoula Strawberry Whiskey is an 86 proof blend of aged wheat bourbon, American light whiskey, and fresh Ponchatoula strawberries. Blended in New Orleans, it is not for the thin-skinned. Look for it in your favorite stores, bars, and restaurants. You better call Botto if you need legal help with any of the following: car wrecks, offshore injuries, 18-wheeler collisions, maritime and Jones Act, hurricane and storm claims. You better call Botto at 504-323-7777 or 985-303-7777 for your free consultation and case review. NewOrleans.Football is proud to be sponsored by Firehouse Subs. Make sure you check out their location on Veterans Boulevard.
Let's get into our lead topic presented by Friend and Company Fine Jewelers. Go check out their new engagement salon, and while you are there, ask them about their fleur-de-lis earrings and necklace. They are specially priced for our NOF audience. All right, this is the last real training camp preseason practice for the Saints. They're going to play in their third and final preseason game this Sunday in the Superdome against the Houston Texans. And look, there's a few starting spots that are still up for grabs, but for me, the biggest one right now is who is starting opposite Cam Jordan? Who is that other defensive end? And to me, Carl Granderson might be the one that's closer to winning that battle, but what do you guys think?
I think it's Granderson, probably, almost certainly. Like, he's been killing it all through camp. I think he's been one of the low-key stars of training camp. He had 4 plays today that he affected. 3 of them I marked down as sacks. Maybe he doesn't tackle the quarterback in a live action every single time, but he would have affected all 4 plays. I thought he dominated. I think he's far and away ahead of Peyton Turner. No offense to your family tree there.
Yeah.
But I think it's been Granderson all the way. I don't even think it's really a 2-horse race.
I've been the Peyton Turner fan club captain, but I wrote 3 weeks ago that I think it's Marshawn Olave and Carl Granderson was my third place MVP of camp candidate, and that hasn't stopped. I mean, the only reason this isn't as cut and dry as it is at some other positions is they will rotate so much that starting, it might be different on third down, it might be different on second down, it might be different on the second series, whereas some of these other positions where we think James Hurst has beat out Andrus Peat, that'll be for the whole game. Where we think Paulson Adebo is ahead of Alontae Taylor, that'll be maybe for the whole game. Granderson might play 40 snaps and Turner might play 30 snaps, but no question about it. Granderson has not only won that job, but when I have talked a lot about how I feel better about the defensive line in general, I agree with Nick that we're going to have to see it when it really counts before we really believe it. But part of my reason is we wonder what Peyton Turner will be. We wonder what Brian Brzee will be. We don't think Isaiah Foskey is going to contribute right away. But what I like is the veteran starter, Carl Granderson, I feel better about the baseline. That it almost gives us more patience that those guys can come along at whatever pace they're going to come along at, because I think Granderson's a bona fide starter.
And it gets into my follow-up question is, are you comfortable with the depth now in that position group, which I think even just a week ago or 2 weeks ago, we were a little shaky on, but even Tano Passanio has been getting to the quarterback.
He's been
we'll see.
Killing it the last
we'll
week.
see what Peyton Turner does. But to me, it's Cam, Carl, Tano, and then the rest.
Yeah, I mean, I put Peyton Turner at Tano's level, and again, another MVP candidate for me has been Malcolm Roach, who now I feel good about the foursome they have at defensive tackle with Colin Saunders, Nathan Shepard, Brian Brzee, Malcolm Roach. So that's 9 guys that I feel like there's not a huge drop-off when you get down to 7th, 8th, 9th guy, and they love to rotate so much. I agree. It's not solidified by any means, and if we're ranking the units on the team we feel best about, it still might rank behind a lot of other units. But that was our biggest worry spot heading into training camp, and it's been one of the most promising things about this training camp is that I feel so much better about it than I used to.
Yeah, I think my issue, I don't feel bad about the depth. I feel like all they have is depth.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem. Like every single guy they have on the interior, this side of Brian Brzee, was not a starter on an NFL team last year, and they probably wouldn't be in a lot of places. I feel the same way at defensive end outside of Cam Jordan. There are other guys, a lot of the 31 other teams, that guy isn't starting on their team, so I think they have a good collection of players, but there isn't a lot of star power. And stars win you games at a certain point, so they need that other guy. That's kind of my issue with it. But, yeah, they're deep. I think they can get by. They have Dennis Allen's mind, which is a difference maker, like as far as like scheming up blitzes and pressures and all that stuff. Like he's going to get guys there. They're going to make plays because he's just so damn smart. But, as far as just like physical ability, I'm going to maintain it until like I'm absolutely proven wrong. I feel like they are a guy or two short on the defensive line.
Well, see, that's where I wouldn't phrase it that way. Like I wouldn't go out and add all the teams that just added their, like adding a Jalen Smith. They needed to add Jalen Smith at linebacker. They're not
at the top end.
They're not short. You said a guy or two short. They're not.
But at the top
they're not
end.
Short bodies. They're short
Talent,
stars. And that's something they would have had to do the first week of March.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, the guys I was listing out in order was just the defensive end. Wasn't doing just the defensive line as a whole when it went as Cam Jordan and so. It's been a fun battle to watch to see who has taken over opposite Cam Jordan. As we all said, we believe Carl Granderson is leading that charge. There is one more preseason game left, so we'll see how it shakes out. Of course, too, one of the biggest questions is how many starters are going to be playing. We didn't really get the details of that today. We do know that Derek Carr is not playing in the last preseason game, but we'll see how many potential ones rotate in on the defensive side of the ball.
Another point to you think Carl Granderson's won the job. In the second preseason game when they rested all the starters, they rested Carl Granderson. I mean, Colin Saunders played, Malcolm Roach played, Tano played.
Yeah.
The guy's never gotten a veteran rest day.
No.
Peyton Turner played, but Carl Granderson rested. I think that says where he sits, and I imagine we'll see the same thing in this game.
As we continue talking about just the competitions, man, it seems like Jalen Smith, we've spoken so highly of him ever since he's joined the Saints and have made that veteran signing in a linebacker room that honestly quite needed it, especially with Demario Davis having that unexpected injury when he was out. They were missing that veteran presence on the field, at least in practice. And now it seems like Jalen Smith has maybe taken Zach Bond's spot.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think he has a chance at it. At least yesterday we went out to practice when they were going through their like walkthrough install. He's ahead of Zach Bond at that position. Today they go through some reps. He's ahead of Zach Bond at that position. I never thought that was Zach Bond's job for sure. I always thought there was a chance that like one of these other guys competing at will or something could play in that role. But I think Jalen Smith is kind of like built to do that in a certain sense. I think he can blitz probably a little bit better.
Looks like it, yeah.
Yeah, I think Bond could get some of those snaps. But look, if you're going to have like range on the field, you're going to have someone out there that can run stop and all that. just play the best players that are out there. I don't think he limits you in the run game. I don't think Zach Bond's like a tremendous upgrade over Jalen Smith in the run game. So I would give him those snaps. And then if there's an injury, he moves over to Will. Pete Werner moves into Mike, or, whatever it may be. But I think that those are the best three. I think you put your best three on the field. I think Bond finds a way to play somewhere, somehow, maybe specifically on third downs where he can tap into, the Wisconsin pass rusher and do some of the Caden Ellis stuff. But to be most effective, you got to be able to do everything, and that's Jalen Smith to me.
No, but look, we've talked about this a lot. We like Jalen Smith so much. He's been a Will and a Mike. He was playing Will and Mike while Demario was out. He was playing next to Pete Werner, but it wasn't until this week that he broke through that next level, which was. Even though I agree with you that I think we always said Zach Bond's biggest competition might be the NFL waiver, the free agency, the guys who get cut elsewhere, that turned out to be true. Nobody else was doing that. Ryan Connolly was doing it with the twos until he got hurt, but it was not one of those positions where one day it's Granderson, one day it's Turner, one day it's, Colin Saunders, one day it's Brzee. Zach Bond was taking these Sam snaps every day for 4 weeks until yesterday, and now it's Jalen Smith, and I don't think they're turning back.
He's taken advantage of an opportunity, and boy, Shaq Davis has taken advantage of an opportunity. He has shined in almost every practice in the last week. He shined in the preseason game, and he's our money segment presented by Jefferson Financial Federal Credit Union because he is so close to me as making that push to make the 53-man roster. I know it's hard to say right now that he's in and maybe Traquan's out just because Traquan Smith has been out with injury. But, man, he is making this really difficult for the Saints coaching staff as, hey, I need to be on this roster. Now it's a matter of how does he fit in? Who do you take out? Of course, it's tight end heavy. But Shaq Davis, I can't remember the last time somebody like him has come in that's a rookie that has his size. He could still add on size because he is a rookie, and he could definitely add some more meat on the bone. But he could really be a dangerous wide receiver if the Saints can somehow keep him, even if it's on the practice squad, if no other teams go and take him.
I think it's practice squad for him. That's my best guess right now, just because if you are keeping him on the team, is he playing? And I think the answer is no right now. I don't know who he's taking snaps ahead of, and that's kind of got to be the methodology for it. Like Marquez Callaway made the 53-man roster because they had a very specific role for him on special teams, some of the stuff at wide receiver. Mm-hmm. That's where he fit in. That's where he was going to play. Shaq has had an incredible week. So, if he were to make the team, I wouldn't be surprised by it at all. I think he's maybe positioned himself better than any other UDFA. And the momentum is coming at the perfect time.
Yeah.
This is when you want to be getting hot. But I just don't know that he has a way onto the field right away. And look, the thing is, you cut these guys, they never get claimed. Nobody ever claims them. So I think you have really good odds of getting them through unless he has a monster preseason game. But you even go back to the last one, there's plays in there that aren't going to, his biggest play of the game is a pass that probably should have been picked off. And if you are a scout watching that game, you're looking at it why wasn't this pass picked off? It's not oh, Shaq Davis did an amazing thing. It's this play would never happen in a just a real situation with real DBs that are playing real snaps for a team. So I don't know, the stuff that we're blowing away with in that game necessarily translates. I think his practice stuff has been better than what we saw in the preseason game. Nobody else can see that.
It's a pretty good preseason game.
Yeah.
Nobody else can see that, though. So, I mean, some of these contested catches he made today,
Eight targets and a carry, not bad.
Not bad at all. But, the Chiefs aren't seeing that, so the Chiefs aren't claiming them because they didn't see today's practice. So, I think you can cut them, get them through, and probably
You did make a good point, though, that there was competition for him after the draft. So, some teams were already high on him. If they do turn on the preseason game, it'll probably, confirm some of the things they already liked about it. But here's my answer to your question. When's the last time we saw a rookie with his shape and his size and his skill set? This year, A.T. Perry. And I just think they're redundant. I have a hard time finding a spot for both of them. If there was no A.T. Perry on this team, I think I'd probably put Shaq Davis on. But I don't think either one of them is the blocker. I don't think, certainly neither one is the veteran that can play all three wide receiver positions. If Traquan Smith gets healthy, he's going to be on the field because he's their best blocker. If Keith Kirkwood is on the field, he can play in the slot. He can move around. I don't think either one of them is probably winning the job on special teams. I don't think they're both contested catch specialists who probably won't be targeted in a game when the top three guys are healthy. So I don't know how you can keep both guys. That's my biggest problem. And not to mention, Jimmy Graham is kind of in the same category, even though he's a tight end. He's only here to catch passes too. So there's just not enough spots for big, tall guys who just catch passes.
Is Shaq better than A.T. Perry?
So to answer, I think it's been a little bit too of recency bias. Like Shaq has been so good this week in practice, but let's not forget what A.T. Perry did in the very first preseason game. He was our player of the game, and I think that maybe gets lost in the fold. How many preseason training camp practices have we been to now? And as you continue to stack days, and that's why we keep saying that Shaq Davis is making a late push. He definitely didn't look like this at the very beginning of training camp.
A.T. Perry had a good practice today too. I kept thinking
I think
Shaq made
Davis
a play,
had
then A.T. made a play. No, Shaq Davis had a better practice.
Yeah.
Shaq Davis was probably the star of today's practice, or one of them. But A.T. Perry didn't just give it up. Like he was like, oh yeah, I need to remind them. I mean, he had the really good catch in the red zone too, a nice contested catch, a couple today that were good. So he hasn't done anything to lose the spot he had kind of risen to. But in the meantime, you know who has lost spots? Kiki Kuti, James Washington, Brian Edwards.
Yep.
So it is real that these young guys have done enough that the Saints have said, we've got enough real candidates here. We don't need those veterans that we added in the offseason.
A.T., he had a good camp. Like Shaq might have just found his confidence and tapped into something, been like, oh, I can play, I can do this, and now we're seeing it. It's entirely possible that he's better, but if you cut both players, who's going to get claimed? A.T. has a significantly higher chance of getting picked up by another team. So I think that kind of factors into it, too. You got to look at, okay, what's every team going to do? Like, there was competition on Shaq to sign him, but, A.T.'s a draft pick who had a third-round grade by some teams. Didn't get drafted there because of off-field concerns or whatever. So he drops. But if you cut him, someone's probably almost certainly picking up A.T., and that just kind of has to be the math here.
I did mention this, I think, on our previous show, though. I usually agree with you that people make too much of you're not going to pass this guy through waivers, especially at running back and receiver. And this will be true if we have an Ellis Merriweather conversation. There's just so many. I mean, we know about the running back depth. It's been one of the biggest stories in the NFL. But that's usually true at receiver, too. Receivers look good all summer. Everybody's got 8 guys that look good at their camp. We talked about Kirk Merritt last year. You usually can. There is something about Shaq, though, the very first thing you said, his size is unique, his contested catch ability is unique. If you are on someone else's team and you already had good draft grades on him and you watch that second preseason game, he is a little more than the usual receiver who has a good camp, that I think there is a small risk someone could claim him. He'd be a good clay to work with if somebody has a 6th receiver spot open, especially the teams that are more in rebuilding mode than the Saints are right now. So I don't want anyone to watch this and then be, see, I told you so. I would put him slightly higher than some of the other people we've seen come through here before. I think there's at least a small chance that he could get claimed.
No. But I think if you have to pick between the two, I think you're more willing to lose Shaq than A.T.
Well, to answer your question, I think Shaq has the edge with contested catches. So it depends on what the Saints are looking for, in my opinion. And I had to actually write this out to say, okay, they're either going to go with 5 or 6 receivers. It's not going to be any more or any less than that. So you have Michael Thomas, Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed. And if you only keep 2 more, who are they? Is it A.T. Perry, Keith Kirkwood? Or is it Shaq Traquan? I mean, you have, if they only keep 5, and we keep saying they might only keep 5 because they might keep 4 tight ends. I mean, that 4th and 5th spot right now is highly competitive, and it is tough.
It is.
We don't know where, Traquan is still rehabbing away from the team.
I feel like, in my mind, and I could be wrong, but I feel like it's Traquan versus Kirkwood, and meaning if it's not them, it's Traquan on IR and Kirkwood on the active roster. And,
I agree.
Or else, if Traquan's healthy enough for week 1, then Kirkwood is still going to be here on the practice squad, and he's not going anywhere. And then I think it's A.T. Perry versus Shaq. I don't see a path to it being the top 3 guys and then A.T. and Shaq. I don't see.
Slight disagreement. I mean, I think there is a scenario where it is possible that it's Traquan. If Traquan's hurt, we can't get any information on him for whatever reason. So if he's hurt, he goes on IR. There's a path where it's the first 3 weeks of the season, it's A.T. and Shaq. Kirkwood's on the practice squad, standard elevation. And then in week 4, it's okay, we can cut one of these guys and maybe get them through, because that's sometimes when it's a little bit easier to get a guy through to your practice squad, because you're beyond that point where everybody's setting their roster, and teams do like to do that.
I agree. Yeah. Kirkwood is the guy that and first of all, if you see the first 53 and Keith Kirkwood gets cut, don't shed any tears for Keith Kirkwood. There is always going to be 1 or 2 veterans that agree with the Saints, you can cut me because I don't have to go through waivers, and I won't clean out my locker, and you will re-sign me on Wednesday.
Right.
I think Kirkwood's definitely a candidate for that. But if Traquan Smith is starting the season on IR, Kirkwood's my fourth receiver, and I'll write that in pen.
He didn't play in the preseason game either, which was a good sign.
They also gave him a rest.
Is a starter.
He's been the starting slot while Rashid Shaheed's been hurt. He can block a little, not quite to Traquan's level, but I would be pretty stunned if they went into the first game of the season with Shaheed is their 3, Perry is their 4, Shaq Davis is their 5.
The standard elevation, though. You can bring them up from the practice
that's
squad.
what I mean.
Yeah.
But I mean that first game.
Yeah, no doubt.
Either Traquan or Kirkwood is playing.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. I think you would do it just 3 games in a row, and then you run that out, you exhaust it, you sign him to the 53, you drop Shaq to the practice squad.
There will be ways to play around to keep your young guy, and that is entirely possible. You especially you could even do it by the end of the week. You could cut Shaq Davis on Saturday. There is something about that first wave, and then teams kind of set their rosters. So teams will play around with that.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right, let's move on and get to some housekeeping notes. Chris Olave was not at practice today. He had a veteran rest day, which is a little peculiar for a guy entering year 2. But as Dennis Allen said, just keeping guys healthy and things like that. Chris Olave, I think to all of us, is just fine, and he'll be ready to go. I don't think he'll play in this preseason game, but he'll be ready to go for the first game of the season.
One thought on that. He practiced 20 days in a row, and I think that they've liked just being a little bit lighter at that position because it allows them this look at Shaq Davis and some of these other guys that are competing. So I think they've liked to clear the deck a little bit at that position just to let some of these guys show through.
And speaking of this last preseason game, we did find out that Ronald Curry will be calling the offensive plays. He also called the offensive plays in their second preseason game. Joe Woods will be calling the defensive plays in this game. And as we mentioned earlier, Derek Carr will not be playing in this third preseason game. Of course, we missed out on the Texans Saints joint practices where we would have been able to see a high volume of Carr against another team, but he still had a lot of high volume this week. They brought the officials out to the 2 practices that would have been the joint practices. So have we seen enough of Derek Carr?
Yeah, probably. I mean, remember, Derek Carr told us in the spring that he doesn't play in the preseason, doesn't like to play in the preseason, and doesn't want to play in the preseason. And then he changes tune a little, saying, he almost had to convince himself.
Yeah.
He's like, I was thinking about the other day. After you get cut, you take advantage of any chance you get to play. But look, that first drive was so good, all they could do is mess it up. And the practices at the Chargers were so good, so competitive, so high volume, so many situations. I absolutely feel like maybe there'll be some rust. The rust I always kind of worry about in week 1 is more about tackling than anything else. I feel like this offense is probably pretty good to go.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason I'd want to see him is just to get some Carr to Mike Thomas plays, some more in live action. It's been a little bit rickety overall. We've seen it gel a little bit, but one more time on the field wouldn't hurt. I don't think it would be, I think there'd be benefit to playing a little bit more, but I don't think it's a huge issue either way.
With Derek Carr out, Jameis Winston is going to get the start, and then, of course, once he's done with his playing period, Jake Haener is going to rotate in at quarterback. And I have to ask you guys this because it's been such a hot topic on social media. Is it wild to say that Jake Haener can beat out Jameis Winston for the backup spot?
Is it, Mike?
I don't think he can. Not maybe by season's end. I don't know how you can do that in season, though. And like I said, I think he's probably the front runner to be the backup next year. But Derek Carr could get hurt on the very first snap of the very first game. There's a lot resting on this team. I think you want the veteran in there. I really do. Jameis has not had a great week. His last practice against the Chargers, his last preseason game. But he's so much more experienced. He's got so many more big games under his belt. He's got good games with the Saints. That would be pretty wild to me. All they've invested in this team that is built to win the NFC South, if they're like, let's let the 4th-round pick be one play away from playing, I'd be really surprised. Yeah,
the thing for me is, I don't know, maybe I'm insane or, completely wrong, but I think if, Jameis isn't the backup quarterback, it's because they traded him. I don't think he's someone you cut. I don't know. Maybe I'm just out there with it. I could see a path where you get rid of him. Haener's kind of your primary backup, and then Taysom comes into the game. Yeah, but I don't see it where it's just we're going to Jake Haener at this point. I think Jake's been pretty good, but I don't know. It's just
I think so too. But then again, what happened the first time Jake got thrown into a preseason game for the first time in his life? He showed some rookie shakiness, and that's the only problem with him. But he's definitely he's a good draft pick for them, and I expect him to have like a Chase Daniel-like career with the Saints and eventually be the backup for this team. I really do. I think that's the trajectory he's on. I don't think that trajectory gets him there 2 weeks from now. But could be wrong.
You know what though? Like if they made a move like that and they said we believe in this dude, like I wouldn't argue with. I wouldn't be like, wow, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like I'd be like, oh, okay, like he actually really is that good, and they believe it because we've seen like really good things so far. But I just think I'm with you. I think it's just a little bit too soon.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Look, in this preseason game, one of the biggest questions for Dennis Allen this week was, what are you guys going to throw at the Texans? Because remember, you play them in the regular season, so you don't want to necessarily throw your playbook at them. And Dennis Allen did say earlier this week it's going to be a lot of base stuff. So he's not giving away too much in the preseason game, but what can we expect to see or maybe learn? Is this going to be a true third preseason game where we got to figure out who's like that 53, 54, 55 guys that are like right on the bubble right there? It seems like that's what this preseason game is going to be, and less about install and things like that.
Yeah, that and giving the snaps to the guys who need it. Trevor Penning, as many snaps as they want to give him. Peyton Turner, Brian Brzee, the guys who need the snaps who are going to play. Like, if you're going to be one of the top 40 players on this team and you need the experience, they're going to put you in this game. I mean, very similar to how they approached the last game, I think.
Yeah, but it's not going to be like when you do a film study of them like during the regular season. It's like you're watching the safeties and it's like, okay, they're in two here, and like, oh wait, they rotated here. This guy moved down here. Is that cover three? Wait, it's cover one. Like you kind of got to dissect it a little bit because that's how DA's defense is. Where's the blitz come from? He's dropping, he's staying, he's going. Like you kind of got to like put the pieces together, and it's hard to decipher sometimes when you're watching these. When you're watching this game, it's going to be like, that's cover three. It was cover three. Like, so they're just going to go out there. They're going to play. They're going to do their thing. They aren't going to disguise. They aren't going to show their pressure package too much. It's just going to be talent on talent. I just got a text a minute ago, like saying that they think Houston's going to play like their starters for a series. So I don't think we're going to see.
It'd be a good test at least for the Saints facing them, whoever's in the 2s or 3s.
Yeah, and they'll get a look at them a little bit, but they aren't going to see a lot of the Saints starters, I don't think. So it's just going to be a lot of what you said. It's going to be competing for roster spots, and what you see is what you get, and you're not going to give too much away.
I'm curious if we get Paulson Adebo and Alontae Taylor. I think they've seen enough from both of those guys that I wouldn't be surprised if – I think Alontae will play.
I think Alontae will see him.
Because he needs the seasoning, and they'll probably play him on the outside and the inside. But that is one more spot where they could scale back, and I wouldn't be surprised.
We've got much more coming up in the show. What's going on with this kicker battle, which – went in someone's way after today's practice? We've got our moment of the day, as well as who we think you guys should be drafting in fantasy, and of course our question of the day from you, the fans. We're going to have 2 of those coming up after this.
Now, at New Orleans Hamburger and Seafood Company, get our $10.99 shrimp remoulade combos with zesty shrimp remoulade and fried shrimp or catfish for only $10.99. And did you hear? Soft-shelled crabs are back at New Orleans Hamburger and Seafood Company.
Are you tired of renting and ready to own your dream home? Contact Jefferson Financial Federal Credit Union, your trusted source for home loans. Our competitive rates and flexible terms can help make your home ownership dreams a reality. If you're a first-time home buyer or looking to refinance, our experienced lenders are here to help. Our online application process allows you to apply on your schedule. It's quick, easy, and convenient. Visit us online at jeffersonfinancial.org to learn more. Federally insured by NCUA, Equal Housing Lender.
At Toro, we were born for moments like this. From bringing new bundles of joy into the world, to delivering what new mothers need to stay healthy. Born to keep hearts beating strong, and to keep seniors active and healthy for years to come. Because at Toro, we deliver more than babies. From heart care to cancer care, and newborns to seniors. At Toro, we're born to care.
Martin Wine and Spirits is home to a selection of hand-picked barrel select bourbon, whiskeys, and much, much more. They are family owned and operated since 1946 and specialize in wine, spirits, gourmet food, gift baskets, catering, and tasting events. They have many locations, so they're never too far away. You can check them out in Metairie, New Orleans, Mandeville, and Baton Rouge, or if it's more convenient, you can always shop online. Whether you're a wine novice or a seasoned collector, you'll enjoy the Martin Wine and Spirit experience.
I'll take a New Orleans Saints scratch up. Play New Orleans Saints from the lottery. Just scratch, fold, and punch your way to winnings. Punch your ticket with New Orleans Saints. Win up to $100,000. Enter our second chance drawings, giving you a season to smile.
Welcome back to PJ's Coffee on Airline. We pick up with our moment of the day presented by New Orleans Hamburger and Seafood Company. Moment of the day, the kickers. Will Lutz went 5 of 7. Blake Grupe, 7 of 7. And to me, it's always seemed like this has been Will Lutz's job to lose. They brought in the competition with the rookie kicker. Lutz just had to remain consistent and make his kicks. I do think it hurts him that this was the last dome practice of the preseason, before the last preseason game, that he goes 5 of 7. We even see him working after practice several times, and it was hit or miss, him doing the re-kicks, hit or miss watching them, and Blake Grupe was just dynamite, 7 of 7. Who's winning this battle right now?
Well, I think before we came on here, you made a good point saying that Grupe hasn't done anything to lose it yet.
No, he hasn't.
Which is, I don't know, it feels more serious now than it ever
really
has
does.
to this point. You start looking at it, young guy's making all his kicks. He's cheaper. He's on a rookie contract. He's making all his kicks. He's not missing his kicks. He made the kick in the preseason game. Granted, it was a chip shot, but pressure situation, delivered. If he goes into this game and he kicks again and he delivers, I think it's a harder conversation than I've ever thought it was going to be. And I don't want to make too much out of one day, but it just, you know, you see Grupe hit from 59, and it's just like, man, this kid's like doing everything he can. You give Will all the benefit of the doubt. I think on a coin flip, you still do.
Right.
But I think it's a much more serious conversation than we thought it was going to be.
This has to be a one-day blip for Lutz. Grupe has had days where he's missed 2 kicks too, and we do not have their totals from practice. I tend to think, I bet Lutz still has the higher percentage total throughout all of training camp. So I don't think they're going to be like what happened on the most recent day, although famously Zach Hocker over Dustin Hopkins. Hopkins was dominating that competition the whole time. Hocker performed better in the final preseason game. They went with Hocker. So it's a real conversation. It reminds me a little what we just said with Jake Haener versus Jameis, though. Even though the young guy has upside and potential, everything about this season feels like, why add risk to a position where you don't need to add risk? So I'm not ready to let practice with 2 missed kicks change what I've felt all along. But I do think the deciding factor, I mean, I think it was Peter King that reported, but we've all talked about it. You know, Sean Payton might need a kicker. He might try to trade for Will Lutz. If somebody's offering a 5th rounder for Will Lutz, then is that a determining factor that you could consider, or a 6th rounder? I don't know. If you told me I had to put $20 down right now, I'm still going to bet on Will Lutz. And I don't think that I would be more concerned if this was like the 3rd time we had seen this in a week or something. That would be hard to ignore, more than one bad day. But yeah, I mean, if we go into the game and Lutz misses one and Grupe makes one, I think that could be a factor. Sure,
I can see it though. They go into the game, they're both perfect, and they still go with the young guy. Like I think it's definitely possible. I mean,
it's not impossible.
I still think, I'm sticking with the incumbent because but I could see it going. Like I really do think it's kind of could go either way at this point. I don't think there's a wrong answer on it, honestly. Like Grupe has killed it. Like it's just he's had a very good camp. He's lasted until this point. Like they kept him here beyond. Other times they bring in kickers, it's like, all right, he lost, he's out of here. Grupe, as Brooke was saying before, like just has not screwed up. Like he's just maintained. He's been steady, and he's hitting when he needs to.
A little different with this to me is, I think what you needed to see from Will Lutz is he over what he's been dealing with the last couple of years. He missed an entire season with injury, and then last year he wasn't quite himself. But he was a Pro Bowler before that, who they made the highest paid kicker in the league. So I don't think it's quite the same situation when they thought they were seeing signs of age with Thomas Morstead and they were ready to make the transition to Blake Gillikin. I think there is a Will Lutz evaluation. And I think, for the most part, I think they've seen enough to think Will Lutz is back to being Will Lutz. If they feel that way, then I don't mess around with it at all. I think you need to have lost confidence in Will Lutz to make the switch. I really do, but I get it.
The variable here, though, is like I think you went into it thinking that, and then it was like, oh, wait, we found one of the best 32 kickers as well, and that changes it. I think it's not just that conversation anymore. I think it's this guy versus this guy. Okay, Will proved himself. If he hadn't, Grupe's winning this because he is he's going to be a kicker for an NFL team this year, and he should be.
Before today, if if they were two newcomers that you had no experience with, who do you think is winning? Who was winning the competition?
I wouldn't have been
You'd
able
say
to
about even.
I wouldn't have been able to call it, and
Yeah.
it's because we are putting names on them that the whole time it's been like, well, it's Will Lutz, it's Will Lutz, it's Will Lutz, because we know Will. And again, if I'm making the decision myself, I'm going with Will. But just being objective about the situation. If they go with Grupe, that's not something where you sit back and go, what the hell are they doing? Like the Hawker Hopkins thing. It's just kind of like, it'd be like, okay, they went with the young guy. He had a great camp. Hopefully it works out for him. It'd be a ballsy move. The reason that I don't think they do it is because what we've kind of said is the theme of the offseason, proven commodities, and they seem to like the proven commodities right now. You go with the kind of sure things, and if you die, you're dying with the sure thing instead of taking a gamble, and that's why I think they end up going with Will.
For the record, Dustin Hopkins, who I think that was 2013. Was it the year before you started covering the team?
No. I was covering the team.
Your first year, 2014?
I was the only person that made the switch on the 53. I went with the kicker that won it because I put myself in Sean's head. I was like, oh, they screwed up in the last preseason game.
To be fair, you and Sean were right because 10 years later, now 10 years into his career, Dustin Hopkins struggled in those practices with the Chargers last week, and I think Dustin Hopkins is going to lose that job. And so 10 years into his NFL career, he might be out of a job. Zach Hawker has been out of a job for 9 years.
Yeah, no question. No question.
It's interesting, though, on this topic, because when Nick and I did the podcast after the second preseason game, we had zero doubts that it was Will Lutz. And it is with this specific competition at kicker, it's a consistency thing. And so on days like today where it did look like, I mean, if you go based on just who won the day, obviously Grupe won the day. He was 7 for 7. Will was 5 of 7. And even when he went to go re-kick, they weren't all perfect after practice. So we'll see how it shakes out and what happens. But I think the Saints keeping the staff that they've had for so many years, I think that's maybe going to aid with keeping Will Lutz. If that's where they're aiming, they're not going to be the type that just make a coin toss decision on the last preseason game.
Yeah, I could just see it going either way. I really could. And like I think it's very much up in the air. And young guy that's one of the best 32 is something that you have to.
But it's also valuable though. What can you get for him?
Yeah,
and
I think you would get more for Lutz. I really do. I don't know that another team could have enough faith. The Saints would have the most faith in Grupe of any NFL team, I feel.
I'm keeping the kicker I trust Musso irrespective of trade value.
Exactly.
So if it is Will Lutz, then I'm keeping Will Lutz, and I just cut the other guy if I can't trade him because I need to make my best decision to win. And a 6th-round pick certainly isn't worth compromising.
And the Saints don't care about 6th-round picks, as we well know.
Let's play the hypothetical here on both sides. Let's start with what do you get for Will Lutz, and then we'll get into Blake Grupe. So let's start with what do you get for Will Lutz?
I mean, I think realistically, best case scenario, either player you get a 7th-round pick.
Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I mean 6 would be the highest. Yeah, exactly.
My thing is, where are they at on the punter battle? Are they still when cuts are made on Tuesday?
How about trade one of your kickers for the punter? That is in the same situation. Is there another NFL team where there are 2 punters who are having the kind of camp that Will Lutz and Blake Grupe are having?
Possibly.
And we will trade you one of our kickers for one of your punters. I mean, that's what it feels like. I feel like they will be the team that might be trading a 7th-rounder for someone else's punter.
What surprised me a little bit is DA seemed very, very high on the punters today when he was asked about them. So, I mean, we'll see.
From the punts I saw, they were pretty good.
It was a good practice.
Yeah.
They were a lot of them going out inside the 5.
I only saw one go out of bounds, too, so not bad. Yeah. Let's hear from our audience here with our Martin Wine and Spirits question of the day. Martin Wine and Spirits is home to a wide selection of hand-picked barrel select bourbon, whiskeys, and more. Skylar Perry asks, do you see more accountability in Dennis Allen this year with the team? Seemed like last year all he said was we got to keep doing what we're doing in his media availability, and this year he's actually addressing issues and what they need to do better. Yes? Definitely more accountability.
Yeah, let me take one part of this and I'm going to throw it back to you. The keep doing what you're doing thing is the worst reaction that the fan base has ever had.
Question.
It was just so dumb. Like Andy Dalton threw a couple picks in the game. Outside of those picks, he was completing his passes. What DA was basically saying was, I'm not going in this locker room and hammering this guy. He threw some picks. He's a veteran player. He understands what he did wrong. I don't have to sit here and berate him. So I'm just going to tell him to just keep his head in the game and keep playing. And the fans just took this and turned it into something.
Of course.
It never should have been.
That became the slogan.
Yep.
Like, I have not run into a person in New Orleans who like that is the phrase. Like that's going to be on, like Dennis Allen will not be a coach here 40 years from now. Oh, the keep doing what you're doing coach. Like that became the symbol of his, and obviously that means don't let the 2 interceptions affect you. Keep doing what you were doing that led us to have the faith in naming you the star. He did. He came back and he threw 2 touchdowns in the second half of that game. The next week they beat the Raiders 24-0. Like, it was actually good advice in that situation.
Yeah.
But obviously the greater question is, I think people felt like DA was a little lackadaisical. I think a lot of people also read into his demeanor on the sideline. What do you call it? Like reading body language and stuff like that, which you probably do too much of too. He's a lot more fiery behind the scene than what you see on the sidelines. We're used to a very fiery former coach here and everything like that. So all of that stuff is really tough to say how wrong he was or how right he was. Were the mistakes they were making early last year because he wasn't breathing enough fire? But regardless, I like everything I'm seeing from DA.
Me
and
too.
He is absolutely trying to create competition. Like Nick mentioned this a million times, how Sean Payton used to, if a kicker was struggling, you'd see 6 kickers come in and try out the next day. Like DA, unless you are one of like 6 or 7 players on this team, I don't think you can feel comfortable that anything is given to you. They're constantly changing out players. Like we said, Zach Bond might have been having a good camp, but here comes Jalen Smith. We see rotations at all these positions. Andrews Pete didn't have anything guaranteed to him. They're going with James Hurst. Like, I think the competition he's created, the willingness to switch out guys to, Jordan Howden might win a prominent position on this team over veteran safeties or whatever. I absolutely see that nobody probably feels too comfortable or lackadaisical this year if anybody felt that was a problem last year.
All right, what have you, like, I know you have some thoughts on, like, just how DA's been carrying himself and that, like, kind of what have you been saying?
We've been able to see his personality and confidence, and really quick to put the, like, whole post-game press conference to bed. No matter what Dennis Allen says in a post-game press conference or any coach, it's not changing your win column or your record. Like, get over it. Like, of course he's going to say it's coach speak. And again, like, he was dealing with a team that just couldn't get it together offensively, and Dennis Allen was calling the defensive plays. He's a defensive-minded coach, and I know a lot of people gave him slack for that. Well, you're still the head coach. You got to figure it out. Whatever. That season is long and gone, and we can tell that season is long and gone because we've been able to see Dennis Allen's personality. He's joking more with us. He's actually very open and honest, which we've talked about all of training camp, which is incredibly helpful for our jobs. He's not trying to hide or conceal injuries or anything like that because at the end of the day, you don't really have an advantage, especially in training camp. It's actually more beneficial to figure out, all right, what guys are they bringing in, who's maybe filling in those roles with Traquan Smith out. We've been able to see a lot of Shaq Davis and Keith Kirkwood come along. And so for me, Dennis Allen just has looked really comfortable, more in his own skin. You see him kind of jarring back and forth with the guys. He even was getting on Riz today because Rizzy called a Tyrann Mathieu sack that was a beautiful touchdown throw from Derek Carr to Jawan Johnson. I believe it was in 2-minute drill.
Yeah,
Tyrann Mathieu got there. I think Dennis Allen would have loved more to see the touchdown go through, but Tyrann would have got there.
Agree with that.
You don't think Tyrann got there?
DA's the defensive coach. He was glad. He was saying
DA wants points, man. DA wants to make.
I think DA's like, hey, it wasn't me who called it.
He did.
Darren Rizzi's the official.
Like, Riz said,
DA's calling that defense. He wants the defensive player.
I think DA wants that offense to score points, so his life's a little bit easier.
In full disclosure, the defense got after the quarterbacks today. I was really
2 days in a
impressed.
row.
2 days in a row, and it's like, ooh, keep that going to the preseason game. It's like, we're not going to see a lot of these ones in the final preseason game.
Yeah,
but.
DA's back in the $150 million quarterback, man. I think the script's changed a little bit.
All right.
What's interesting about that though is somebody just asked Demario Davis yesterday about DA and saying it's noticeable. I mean, what you're saying is completely true. Somebody asked Demario Davis, is DA carrying himself with a little more swagger this year? And DeMario's answer really struck me because he was like, DA does have more swagger because this team has more swagger.
Oh.
And he said he had a couple coded things. He goes, I'm not going to let you in on why, but I just promise you, if you're a Saints fan, you should be very excited. This team has swagger right now.
Yeah.
I don't know what that'll translate to. A loss to the Titans in week 1 takes all of that away, but they believe in what they're doing. I think that is genuine.
I'm seeing DA from the season when Sean was out with COVID and they went and kept the Bucs in Tampa Bay out of the end zone. That's the DA that I've been seeing in training camp.
Yeah, they even caught him on video in the last game chewing someone out and like showing emotion on the sideline, which is another dumb fan thing. They're like, he's just stands there and he's a cardboard cutout. Like, come on, man.
And
like,
he's a
chewing people out.
defensive-minded coach. Like, I'm sorry. I feel like more defensive than offensive, and like this might just be biased because I was more on the defensive side of the ball in my playing career, and like I feel like we were the ones that were chirpy and yelling and getting after people more so than they were on the offensive side of the ball. But then you have like a Sean Payton who's like gonna come after you for anything. So
yeah.
I don't know.
To
I don't know if that's
that
fair.
point, defense being his specialty, keep doing what you're doing. Kind of worked for the defense last year. The defense was struggling early in the season, very uncharacteristically, giving up more big plays than we've seen. The run defense was slipping. And he never kind of wavered and said, let's change what we've been doing around here for years. And they ended up the number 2 pass defense in the league. They were holding teams to 10 points a game down the stretch. Offense, they should not have kept doing what they were doing. The offense needed a major shakeup last year, but that approach with the defense, I'm not going to let a bad September make me panic over what I know what works on defense. Turned out to be the right approach last year because the defense did end up really righting the ship last year.
All right, we've got 2 Martin Wine and Spirits question of the day. I feel like we've jumped the gun on this one a little bit, but do you think Andres Pete will get benched for James Hurst at left tackle?
Yeah, no question. I think that's done.
Left guard.
I think it's gone. Left guard. Yeah, it's done. It's done. I mean, Andres Pete isn't getting in there. It's been James Hurst since Pete came back. Finished, done. That's your week 1 starting offensive line. I would be shocked if we see anything else.
I bet Pete plays in this game and starts at left guard to make up for his lost time while James Hurst gets the veteran rest day too.
Well, we even were able to see kind of the one-on-ones too, the offensive linemen and defensive linemen. I believe that was during 7-on-7.
Yep.
They were happening on the same field, and it was actually at a vantage point where we could kind of like peek over.
You can see it better in the Superdome than any other time. Yeah.
Andres Pete just didn't look. Maybe he's working to get back to himself.
Oh,
like he still is coming back from the time off.
Yeah, he doesn't look right, but it's James Hurst's job. Like, it just really is.
To be fair, though, 2 of the most impressive snaps in that one-on-one were Brian Brzee.
Brian Brzee was crazy in that.
Beating Hurst and beating Pete. So equal
Who was
opportunity.
The one where it was like he got around him so fast?
He did the same kind of swim move on both of them, and it worked both times.
You mentioned, too, that we'll see in a game when it's like 5 guys stacked up if he's spinning around because you're most likely running into somebody else in that position.
Yeah, the quote-unquote – this is what I've been saying about Peyton Turner a lot. Peyton Turner's looked great in that drill. Like, that stuff works a lot better in a one-on-one sometimes than it works when you have 5 offensive linemen in front of you.
Yeah.
But that was still those were good moves by Brian Brzee.
Look, a DT spinning that fast
almost
works all the time because those dudes on the inside aren't that quick.
It was scary watching from the other side.
Yeah.
All right, it's Friday, which means our fantasy segment is back, presented by the Louisiana Lottery. This one is a 2-parter. How many draft-eligible players are on the team?
I mean, there's a lot of how many would I draft on the team? I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there's a huge like.
Well,
I draft Mike. I draft Olave. I draft Alvin. Taysom probably. Jawan probably. Carr probably. And then I think you're kind of up in there on Shaheed's kind of like a late round gamble. I think Taysom is someone you probably take.
You're going to draft Jamal Williams and Kendrick Miller too because running backs.
Maybe, I mean, maybe, but I mean, I think like early on, like they're gambles. Like if there were leagues where those guys are on the waiver wire, that wouldn't shock me either. I would probably take Kendrick. Jamal, I'm starting to get higher on over the last like week or so. You're just kind of like seeing his like burst in energy a little bit more. Kind of looking a little bit like Alvin's going to be more in the passing game, and those 2 guys might be like who they lean on to get more of the carries this year. But, yeah, I mean, I think just kind of the headliners are the ones that you're jumping after, and they got a bunch of guys at the end that would probably be solid.
So I wrote earlier this week, I wrote my projections for all the ones who I think probably should or will get drafted in bigger leagues, like 12-team leagues or bigger. And the takeaway was there's only one that you should draft high, and that's Chris Olave, obviously. Probably the only one in the top 50. I'm high on Alvin Kamara. I'm high on Kendrick Miller's lottery ticket potential, but I'm also high on Jamal Williams too, and for that reason, I mean, all 3 of them will get drafted, especially since the other 2 guys can get used right away in week 1 while Alvin is being suspended. But my best fantasy advice regarding the Saints is I'd load up on them late in my drafts. I think they have a lot of good sit and wait guys. Juwan Johnson's still ranked outside of the top 12 tight ends by most people, even though this doesn't work if you're in a local league. Like I'm in one right now that's like a slow draft, and Juwan Johnson was like the 8th tight end taken because the secret is out here locally. But I'd love to get him late in a draft. I would take Taysom Hill with my last draft pick as my tight end. Derek Carr is widely ranked 20th or lower among quarterbacks. I'd take him at the end, certainly as my backup, or maybe in a deep league. I wouldn't even mind starting Derek Carr. Rashid Shaheed would be a good lottery ticket late in the draft. So that's where I think the value is with these Saints. We all think this offense is going to be better, and I wouldn't mind having a Saint at pretty much every position that you can get basically for free in fantasy drafts this year.
All right, it gets to the second part. Are you picking the Saints defense in your draft?
Oh, yeah, I'm taking the Saints defense for sure. I think they're going to have a good defense, and I like their special teams. So, yeah, I'm taking them for sure.
Yeah, they're a top 5 ranked defense by most fantasy analysts. I mean, the numbers have borne it out several years in a row. That's not just like a Saints bias. They're one of the – I mean, they are. They're one of the top defenses, and they have been for a long time.
All right, we will see if some of the position battles that we have talked about on the show change after this final preseason game. Saints and Texans taking on each other for a late game in the Superdome on Sunday. And the next time you will see the three of us sitting together will be for our next pod. After that game, we're going to talk a little bit about our 53-man roster projections. And remember, cutdown day is Tuesday, and we'll see you next time.